Well, welcome to the latest edition of the Buyer's Guide. In this video I'm going to be talking to you and showing you a mix that I would normally be using right now at this time of year. It's a mix that I use at Southfield Reservoir and I've used it for the last 2 years in their Spring League. So it's kind of a mix that's a little bit toned down. It's not one of your full-on strong summer mixers. It's a combination of two different ground baits. So tonight I'm going to be showing you a mix that's caught loads and loads of bream on venues at this time of year. Well, last year I fished the Southfield Spring League and the mix that I decided to use on there was a combination of two different mixers that you've probably all heard of, and that was a combination of what a lot of us refer to as Ringer's Dark and Natural. Simple as that. The Dark I'm sure a lot of you have seen, and that's the mix that we tend to use in you know, the height of summer when we're bream and carp fishing. And the Natural is one that we refer to as natural, but it is actually the bag up carp mix. It's a more natural colour, but by combining these two together you can still get the strength of a nice strong fish meal mix, but you're just kind of toning it down a little bit for this sort of time of year when the water's still cool and the fish aren't quite moving around quite as much. So let's have a look at the packaging first. Well, the Ringer's Dark, I'm sure you all recognise this. I mean, it's really well known visually on the shelves. It's got the green text, green logo and everything, but then it's also got the just a black background. Still got the price on, so that's a bit of a giveaway as to how much these bags cost. These come in 1 kilo bags, and it has got a window in the packaging so you can see the lovely dark fine green colour of the mix. If we flip that over, we've got some tips on here for mixing. Always use a shallow bowl with a large surface area. Some nice tips there just for making sure you're going to get a nice even consistent mix. Okay, what else we got over here? This dark version of Ringer's bag up carp mix retains all the high attraction levels of the original. Bit of information about the mix there. Again, it's saying it's 1 kilo. Ringer's commercially correct. There we go, that says it all. We've also got a sticker here which might have a bit of batch information. Dark green ground bait, 1 kilo again. It's got a BB, best before date, of the 15th of the 10th 2022, and it's also got a batch code on there, so it's giving you some sort of an idea of how old this mix is, which is something we've got to be careful of. You know, I'm sure we've all been in tackle shops, certainly the less busy ones, the ones there that might have had mixers on their shelves for a long time. I'm not saying that makes the mix less effective, I don't know, but it can certainly affect the confidence of certain anglers. So well, have a look at the other part of the mix, and that's the Ringer's bag up carp and bream mix. I think basically the history of this mix was they just realised, obviously it was developed for carp originally, but then they realised how good it was for catching bream as well, so that's why it started to get used more and more for targeting bream. 1 kilo bag again, and you can see that lovely, it's a fine mix anyway, but you can see it's that more natural colour in comparison to the dark green. Okay, so you've got a nice contrast there, but obviously we'll see what that mixes up like in a moment. And the packaging on the back is really the same as the other one. Okay, so it's got some mixing guidelines there for you to give you the best way of mixing it. Some more information about the mix. 1 kilo bag again, and again it's got another batch sticker on there. 1 kilo, date of packaging 3rd of the 9th 2019, and it's got a batch number on there as well. So really distinctive packaging. Now when I say I always use this mix, I've only ever used this mix in this same ratio, okay, and that is 50-50. And as far as I know, by speaking to some of the anglers that use these mixers all over the country, that tends to be the most commonly used ratio. So let's get it mixed up and see what it mixes like. So all I'm going to do is mix it 50-50. I'm not going to mix too much. That is a 1 pint tub. What I would normally do is, with these particular mix, when I go to Southfield and that sort of venue at this time of year, I only really need, because I'm only feeder fishing, generally with relatively small feeders, I only need to mix about 2 pints of ground bait. Now I know from experience a 1 kilo bag like this is exactly 3 pints of ground bait. Okay, so simple as that. So if you buy a bag of this and a bag of that, I can get 3 solid sessions out of it, which makes it quite economical. So all I'll do is empty that. I just half fill that. So that's the natural. as we keep calling it. And we'll top it off with the dark. So we know that's a 50-50 mix. We'll see the contrasting colour when we start mixing it. So it's obviously going to go a lighter green than obviously the dark on its own, because you mix the lighter mix with it. You can really smell the fish meal. I remember one of the first time I ever used certainly the Ringerbaits Dark, was how strong the fish meal smell was that came off it. You know, and it's really surprising when you compare it to some other ground baits in that sort of price bracket, which these are £3.99 generally, that some other mixers in that sort of price range don't smell, and they haven't got such a strong fish meal flavour or smell to them. Okay, so as you can see, that's the colour of the mix, dry, and as we'd expect, that's now going to go darker as we mix it. I'm not mixing this with a drill, and that's because I know the majority of anglers don't use a drill. Okay, and to be quite honest, when you're fishing venues like Southfield Reservoir, where I fish a lot, and places like that, where the fishing isn't fantastic most of the time, you're only mixing 2 pints of ground bait. So, you know, when you're only mixing that quantity of ground bait, it can be a little bit overkill, in my opinion, to carry a 12-pound drill and whisk just to mix that amount of ground bait, because you put it through, or I do, put it through a sieve anyway. Now that's exactly what's going to happen with this mix. Now, because I'm mixing it just with my hand and with water, just blobbing it in, as they say, it is going to have a few lumps in it, but that's the same as with every ground bait. So you can see that's darkened down quite a bit now. Now what I'm going to do, in the first series of videos that I did for this, I gave the mixers just 10 minutes before I tested them in the tank. I'm going to do it slightly different from this episode onwards, and that's because I'm going to give them 20 minutes, because I think some of the mixers we were using, it wasn't quite a true reflection that, you know, there were quite a few particles in the ground bait. 10 minutes just wasn't long enough, and in reality we wouldn't mix a ground bait 10 minutes before we use it anyway. Usually it's got a good half hour at least to rest before the actual start of the match, because it's usually the first job that, you know, if you haven't mixed it on the morning or the night before, then it's usually the first job that you do when you get to your peg. So as you can expect, it's usually a good half an hour at least before you're actually going to be using it. So I'll just put an extra bit of water in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that now. I'm just going to leave it exactly 20 minutes, and then we'll come back to it. I'm expecting it's going to dry out a little bit. We'll probably have to add a little bit more water to it, and then we'll see if it can be over-wetted and what it's like in its dry state. Okay, well that's been 20 minutes now. I've put it through quite a coarse, I'll show you, quite a coarse sieve, as you can see there. So it's not a really fine one. I would normally use one a little bit finer than that, to be honest, but it'll give you a good idea of what it's like when it's a nice even mix. Now the first thing we want to do is want to see if you can over wet it. There are some ground baits you can't do that with, so let's try it. So if I just portion a section off, some ground baits just go like paste when you over wet them, and that's obviously just down to the way that they've been made, you know, the ingredients. Now I know from experience of using this mix that this will allow you to over wet it, but I just want to show you. But as you can see there, you can probably hear it on my fingers. Okay, overwet's really nice, and you can just overwet that to whatever consistency you want it to be. All right, depending on how far you're casting the feeder. You might even be feeding it as balls on a pole line. So that's great. It shows you it's really nice and flexible, so you can overwet it. So that means you can have the mix really dry, or you can have it really wet. So and anywhere in between. So that's great. That's what I like, because it means you've got several different ways of fishing with this mix in one session. So that's great. That shows us that it's a really nice flexible mix that you can use in different consistencies, because that means you can have one mix on your side tray, but you can do lots of different things with it. So what I'm going to do now is, all I've got here is a nice large cage feeder. I'm just going to use this, well, I'm going to fill it with the normal mix, you know, the consistency that you would usually have it in, your starting kind of consistency. So it's not really dry and it's not the really wet stuff, it's just normal. And what we can do is I'm going to pop it in the tank, and we can see how it's going to perform when it actually goes in. Now I'm not going to pack this in really tight, okay? If I was casting, say, 50 meters on a normal kind of normal conditions. I've just packed it in at that, so that's in there. It's not too loose, so it would come off on that sort of a cast, but it's packed in about a medium consistency. All right, so and see how it's going to perform once it's in the water. Well, there you go. Well, straight away you can see there's hardly anything coming off that mix now. There's quite a lot of air, but they're just little air bubbles, the odd larger air bubble coming off, but that's breaking down quite quickly already. It is quite a fine wire cage feeder, admittedly. That's the style that I love to use when on most occasions, because the water can get to that ground bait really quickly and start breaking it down. And as you can see now, it's only been in a few seconds, and already it's really breaking down quite quickly. There aren't hardly any particles coming off that. There's hardly anything going up, and in the shot you can just about see the surface of the water, so you can look at the surface of the water just to see, you know, how little has actually come off that and gone, you know, floating up. It's got a nice green haze down at the bottom of it, lovely dark green colour, but there's not much of a cloud as such. There's a bit of a haze around the ground bait, but it's quite an inert mix, as you can see now. That's almost broken down fully now already, and that's only been in about a minute or so. You can see the tiny little bits of feed now just coming through. Just like when you over wet a mix like this, you often, you know, to the naked eye on a dry mix, you can't always spot the feed that's in there, but sometimes when you over wet a mix, and once it's mixed, obviously some of those particles and bits of feed are going to absorb a bit more water than the others, and so when they are mixed like they are now in the tank, they've expanded a little bit more, and you can see them. It's a little bit more obvious about how much feed is actually in there, so you can see those little bits of feed in there, but it's just a haze. There's no cloud there. It's just a real nice inert mix, and to be quite honest, that's exactly what we're usually after when we're using this mix. We're usually after larger fish, big skimmers, bream obviously, and this kind of a mix is ideal for that, because it's inert and it's not really fizzing and it's too active where it's going to attract the attentions of too many small fish. You know, if they're the fish that we were targeting, then we would use a completely different mix. So this is why this mix has been so successful. But as you can see now, that's probably coming up to 2 minutes now that that's been in. There's hardly anything coming off that now, hardly any air or anything, and that's broken down completely. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift the feeder out of the tank now, and what this is going to do is obviously stir some of that up, and it'll show us what kind of a cloud might come off it, and if it does, that will also show us how quickly it's going to settle as well. So let's just give that, I'll just give it a nice sharp straight out of the tank. There we go. So that's kicked off loads and loads of ground bait up in the air. It's really stirred it up, which is showing you that it's a fine mix, because when it's fine it's light, so it's going to get kicked up a bit more, not active, but it's lighter, so that it's going to get flicked off the bottom much quicker. And look at the green haze you've got around it now, so that's all lingering there. Admittedly this is in a tank on a normal water or a large venue, certainly one with any tow. All that kind of the green haze will be getting moved out of the peg in some shape or form, but it just shows what kind of attraction you can kick off from one feeder full of ground bait without having done anything. All you've done is cast the feeder out, you've sat on it for 2 minutes, that was in, and then you've retrieved the feeder and you've seen how much attraction's come off that. And that's why with mixes like this, at this time of year, you can quite often catch fish by just using the mix on its own without putting any feed in. Well, I think that's been really interesting to see it like that. Like I say, when you look at the other ground baits in the price range of this one, these are on sale at £3.99. These particular bags that I've got here in stock that I should have been using right now at Southfield, but we can't get out there fishing. These were bought from Billy Clark's Fishing Tackle in Sheffield, £3.99 a bag. I also know that Wickersley Angling, which is between Sheffield and Rotherham, it's probably more classed as Rotherham than that's Wickersley Angling. They're £3.99 there. I know they stock them, but I know for a fact that these ground baits are readily available all over the place. They really are a common mix to get hold of, but obviously you can get them online as well. So I thought you'd enjoy seeing this particular mix. I know it's a mix of two different ground baits, but that answers a lot of the questions that we get about when you might have a favourite mix for summer and you might have a favourite mix for winter. What happens in this middle period, springtime, when the fish are starting to move around a little bit more, you know, they're getting a little bit more mobile as they're chasing each other around, about starting to think about spawning and that sort of stuff. Well, this is a combination of two mixes to create one mix that I think is ideal for this sort of a scenario. I hope you've enjoyed this bit of an insight. If you don't want to miss the rest of the series and loads of the other videos, just hit subscribe. And if you want to see more coaching tuition style videos, ones that are more from this tattle room, then check out my other channel just there. Thanks for watching, hope you've enjoyed this insight, and I hope to see you all in the next video.